There. All right, thank you, everybody. Move some things around. Okay. So again, thanks so much for being here. What we're doing is Undisputed ROI, how to measure the impact of coaching without driving everybody crazy. So let me first ask you to just put in chat one more time, what is a challenge or an issue or an aspect of measuring the ROI of coaching and leadership development that you're interested in today? So this is kind of the why are you here today question. And I would consider it kind of customer requirements. So why you're here and kind of what your expectation might be. We've got some more people coming in. So hi, Christine. Lovely to see you. Yeah. So what we're doing right now, first, and I don't know if you're looking at chat, we did ask people to just, for fun, kind of indicate where they are, what they see out their window. So you can answer that if you want, Christine. And then the next thing we're asking is essentially the why are you here today? What is a challenge or aspect of measuring ROI and evaluating coaching and leadership and team development efforts that had you interested? So we already have some great questions: measuring results, quantifying value of impact or improvement, coaching effects may be delayed and part of a complex multi-causal change. Yeah, these are great questions. I'm a little worried if I'm going to be able to meet your needs. I'm kidding. So again, please feel free, if everybody can, to put a little bit in chat, and then we'll dive right in. So I'm going to kind of let you keep putting things in chat there, but those are already great questions. So our outcome today is to talk about Undisputed ROI, understanding how to use it and essentially make it your friend. So in my mind, ROI is not simply just the idea of saying, well, there's a financial or type of measurement or evaluation. It also means that we have had a different kind of a conversation with the client or the coachee. And so you're actually, by the act of doing the ROI itself, increases the impact, sort of formally measurable or otherwise. So it makes for a different conversation at the start of any engagement or conversation. So often we go right into the maybe skills we should develop, or there was an assessment or gaps. But what we haven't really done is say, now, how is this going to impact your business outcomes? And how is this going to impact the things you're already measuring and care about? This actually creates more inspiration. And by the way, I think we need to inspire not just the people being developed, the team or the leader, but the coach needs some inspiration. And if you do this over and over, and you do it on all your different engagements or all your different efforts, you actually start to have a cultural impact. They have a synergistic effect, these conversations and this type of effort and documentation, to create what we call a social learning culture. So the idea of social learning is based on the idea that the more complex the problem, the more social the solution is going to have to be. And so these type of cultural changes are the kind of changes that get huge ROI. Let me look at some of the other questions here. Continue and evaluate my leadership style. The anxiety of the C-suite and the next area being measured on their own behavior. Yeah, so there's definitely can be, this is the sort of driving everyone crazy aspect of measuring ROI. And then, yes, Vic's taking a call, but he'll be back, he said to me directly. Okay, very good. So that's what we're here to talk about. And so our agenda is we're going to sort of say, why ROI, sort of what's my journey about how I kind of got into doing this. I've been doing this for 30 years, but I'll admit I haven't been doing the ROI type of work for more than about 8 or 9 years. Then we'll talk a little bit about the challenges. You've listed some in a way here. Then we'll get into the solution, action learning, stakeholder-centered goals, and I'll specifically provide a goals sheet for you. And then I really want to make sure we have time for a little bit of dialogue before we end. So again, I would encourage you to put things in chat anytime you want. I've got a lot of things on my screen, so I might not always see a raised hand. So I would say take yourself off mute, make a comment, ask a question. All right, makes sense. So let's, yeah, very good. So thank you for a little feedback there, thumbs up. So ROI, and excuse me, let me get my notes together here. And then, by the way, great to see so many old friends and hopefully new friends. The other thing that I forgot to mention, I guess, when I talked about why ROI, the transformational impact, the inspiration, the changing your conversation with the client. Changing your conversation with the client will immediately change your influence. So a lot of people I work with, especially if they might be in a learning or development function, one of the things that sets the really great people who do that from other people is the great people have a quote seat at the table. The business partners, their internal clients, are quite demanding and understand that what we're doing is directly impact the changes, the projects, the people, the things they're trying to get accomplished. Literally could impact a stock price, could impact revenues. And so what this does is set you up with a seat at the table almost automatically, because if you're linking the work you're doing to the things they already care about, then you don't have to make that connection later. We don't have to later say, oh, well, how did we help? We actually do that at the beginning. And so again, that's how it makes a big difference. So I've taken a number of surveys here. I've looked at a lot of people and gotten their thoughts about it. And when they asked about it, and some of you, thank you, filled out your survey for this session. Your quote may not be up here. But what makes it hard? Executing what you've learned, applying the concept to action. So this is an unfortunate aspect of our business where people sort of learn and then too many times have to say, okay, now what exactly do I do in my next meeting, in my next conversation, in my next presentation, in my next decision? How do I actually apply what I've learned? And then when you get into learning and measuring, a lot of times people go, well, I'm trying to do this after the fact. And so again, the big solution there is don't do it after the fact, do it at the beginning. Many of the things we're looking at are somewhat intangible. Some of your comments have already sort of said, well, it's a complex system out there. How can I make sure that this is impacting that? How do I do this uniformly? I may have dozens of clients or dozens of people in my company that are using coaching or taking leadership or team development efforts. How can I do this across the enterprise? And then how do I evaluate change behavior processes if there isn't really a hard data for me to reference? So I would ask, are there any other key challenges that you'd like to mention? And so I'll ask you to just come off mute if you have any other challenges you want to mention or want to just kind of give a here to the challenges we've already talked about. So what else comes to mind for you when you think of the challenges of measuring ROI?
Agreeing what's important.
So say some more about that.
Well, it's I mean, there's two areas where I'm working, agility, transformation, as coaching and leadership. So the client, especially in leadership, you have the client's view, personal, and you have the institutional view, the company they work for. So you may be engaged by the company to work with the individual, or you may be working with the individual, and their value systems are going to be different and may or may not be aligned.
Yeah, it almost makes me think of sort of, well, before I can measure anything, I need to know sort of who's the client exactly. And sometimes that's going to be not attention. But other times, as you say, it could very much be a tension between sort of organizational outcomes and coach outcomes. And I think most of us as coaches are very trained to focus entirely on the coachee. But I think this approach to ROI does try to address that. So I think when you see some of the other ideas here, hopefully that might help a little bit with managing that conversation and kind of resolving that tension. I will say one other comment right now, since you brought it up. One of the things that I'll often do, which I may not remember to say later, so I'll say now, is this idea of personal goals and public goals. So while most of a coaching engagement or conversation might be confidential, it is in most companies I work with, they do ask, hey, can we understand your development goals? What's the plan for this engagement? And it's okay to have, I think, private goals that you and the coach are understanding as part of the engagement and might be measured and evaluated later. And then more public goals where we share with everybody what the leader's trying to do and improve and how it's going to impact a project, a change, an outcome. And so thank you very much for that comment, David. Anybody else have a challenge that they want to highlight? All right, we're going to keep going. What I say here, over 154 million from 32 clients in just the last 3 years. So, and we all know what the last 3 years were like in terms of the pandemic and everything. And I would say, by the way, a very conservative number. So this definitely can be done. Let's talk a little bit sort of about why I personally got into this. So first, many of you know me, some of you know me extremely well, but we'll just talk a minute about kind of my journey. This is a photo on the left here. I guess that's on everybody's left, of Yosemite Falls in Yosemite. And the idea of the waterfall there is to be in flow. So that's sort of the image of being in flow. And I think that's what a lot of people really want from coaching or leadership or teamwork development, is to have everybody in flow. What's it mean to be in flow? Well, here's a picture of me in flow in another part of my life where I'm sailing. The wind is quite strong and it's challenging, but I'm successful. And that's flow. You're challenged, you're learning new things, you're achieving new outcomes, but it's not all anxiety, it's not all tension, it's not all stress. Maybe you're familiar with the book Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. I may have gotten his name wrong a little bit. He just passed away, I think, the last year or so. So a lot of people were thinking about him recently. But he talked about this idea of flow, which is this balance of challenge and growth and success and accomplishment. And so when I first kind of got into this whole thing that I do, this whole idea of leadership and teamwork and helping to support people to develop, I'll talk about my own life just for a second. Before I became an organizational consultant, a leadership and teamwork coach, I was a programmer. I worked at a company most of you have not heard of called EDS, which was Ross Perot's company. It was a very intense kind of environment, in some ways a wonderful place. I learned a lot. I was privileged to work for a lot of great leaders, but it was also a very tough place to work. The culture had a lot of tough aspects to it. And I was a programmer, a systems engineer, project leader, and account manager. And things would happen that I just didn't understand. So sometimes the fact was I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why it was happening. And it would adversely impact me. And I experienced that at EDS. And I also experienced, so that might be sort of the hell of teamwork. I also experienced the joy of teamwork. I experienced clients where I felt like we did the work they wanted, but they wouldn't renew our contract. And so this made me just very curious, what's happening here? And I realized more and more it was the human side of what was happening. And so many of my clients give me this opportunity to help them through that journey, help them see with new eyes so they can see what's happening on an interpersonal dynamic. They can discuss it and think about it, and then come up with a strategy to take action to change it, and to do that in a way that gets them more in flow. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from a little bit in my story. And then why ROI? I have to say for years, and some of you may relate to this, if you ask in the 90s when I started coaching, you ask the client, hey, how's it going with Michael? Is he a good coach? Is it worthwhile? They might say something like, boy, I have great conversations with Michael. They ask really good questions. And that used to be sufficient. it's not sufficient. What I want my clients to say, whether it's a team, an individual, a whole organization, we were able to do things we didn't think we could do. So in the end, this is about outcomes. A great company that's making a lot of money and that's doing well for all the employees and the clients, it's about outcomes. So this is really what I started to realize more and more was more satisfying for me, certainly more valuable in terms of my business offering. So how did I get into ROI? Because I still didn't do all that. And I was essentially forced to. So I won't name the client, but we had a client that said, look, every engagement, we calculate the ROI. We have a specific set of goals. So Michael, you're going to have to do that with clients here. And I don't know if I was a little lazy or egotistical or what, but I thought, oh, I don't need that. I have all these happy clients. But I was really missing an opportunity. So when I first did that, the way it animated, the way it changed the entire engagement, and again, I've done this at a team level as well as individual people that I'm working with, really animated and excited me. And I realized there's a new vision. There's a new way that I could go for this, and that my entire strategy, pretty much everything I did, starting to change and I think get much better because I could do that. And some of you may have heard of my famous grandfather, Kurt Lewin, who is one of the organizers and developers of organizational development and kind of invented with other people this whole idea of leadership and organizational development. And I'll quote him: our theories and our work is only as good as the actual impact it has on others' lives. So when he was an organizational Gestalt psychologist, many people would consider the people they worked with the subjects of an experiment. He decided that they're the client and that they're not a subject of an experiment, that what we do and what we develop is only as good or as valuable as the impact it has on people's lives. And I certainly still believe that. So that's kind of a little bit about where I'm coming from, and just another little peek at Mr. Lewin. I'm going to celebrate my mom. So I kind of come from this heritage, Miriam Lewin. I don't think anybody on this call knows who EDC sure was, but these are sort of some of the great people that I was able to work with. There's an old saying, I think it was Einstein who said, if I accomplished anything, it's because I've been standing on the shoulders of giants. And so to me, these are the giants that I'm kind of standing on the shoulder of. And I believe the best way to honor those who have come before us is to try to continue their work and try to further the things they cared about. And so, to understand me a little bit is to understand a little bit about where I came from and why it's important. Sort of last thing kind of about me here is a little bit about the work I do. I have a book and it's available on Amazon. I have a course on Udemy that's been incredibly successful and gratified. I shot this in my library at my old house right in the middle of the lockdown. They sent me a studio in a box. So they actually sent a studio and a tech that sat outside, and I was able to do that. It's been gratifying in terms of the work that I do. You can see some of the different things that I do on the side here. I think most of you kind of know me and what I do. So let's, there it is. So a little bit about kind of coaching, leadership development. So we say ROI. So the I is the investment. Some of these numbers are pretty shocking, and they're a little old now. The reports are from 2020, so some of the numbers are from 2019 or 2020. The U.S. spend on just coaching was, I think, 2.89 or something billion, almost 2.9 billion. And so let's think about ROI. These are sometimes helpful statistics for you to use in your own organization to talk to people. 51% of the organizations that measure their ROI and that have what we would call a coaching culture saw higher revenue than those who do not have a coaching culture. 86% of the people that did try to measure at all their investment made back at least the cost. 20% made a 50x return. And I've actually seen many of my clients get more than 100x return. So there's no question that you can have some very dramatic impacts, and these are serious studies that have tried to measure this. One study found a 221% ROI on the coaching investment. So clearly, if you do it right, you can get a really big impact. I would say, what about the other 80%? What about the other 49%? Why aren't they getting this ROI? And I think it's, again, because of the missing a little bit of the structure that really helps. And so I'm going to share information about that structure. But first, let me ask you a question. How do you know that it's working today? So I did a little survey on LinkedIn a couple months ago. You can see it here. So I gave some choices. Ask the coachee if they're happy. And this is a little bit like the smile sheets, we used to call them in a training workshop, where you basically, sort of ask at the end of the workshop, did you like the workshop? And that's fine. That's nice. Ask the coachee's manager. So that's where we say, well, do you feel like the coaching that's been happening for your person has been helpful? But the most popular answers, as you see, were look for behavior change. And again, we've already talked, there are a lot of challenges with looking for behavior change. But that's one of the things we look for. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what we call stakeholder-centered coaching. And stakeholder-centered is essentially saying to certain pre-planned stakeholders, do they see a change, and do they see the change we want to see, which I think is important and helpful. And then the coachee achieves new results. So how do you try to measure or evaluate, what's the process, or what do you do today? Let's just hear from a couple people if you want to take yourselves off mute. Also, we don't do anything today could be an answer, or I don't see, those of you who are in the business and have clients. How are you measuring impact today?
Michael, this is Gary. I really go off of one of the things you said earlier, is I don't accept a contract. And even when I was a senior manager as an internal, I didn't accept any work until the client said what they wanted. And my coaching work was in times getting them to be clear, because they weren't. So the first step is, what do they expect to get out of this? And I measure against that, rather than a coaching point of view is, was the coaching good? I actually don't care. What I care is, did you make the difference, and how did we help you, as opposed to, did you like me? Did you like what we did? So I really go for, what are your goals, and measure those. And that's the first part of the contracting.
Yeah, that's great, Gary. One thing I really appreciate about what you're saying is, again, in a coaching call, I have a couple of choices, and some that will come up sometimes. Do I want to do what's going to make this person like me? Or do I want to try to do what the person kind of hired me to do in terms of, the value I'm trying to provide? So that's a great point. And I think, it's an attitude that you've got to have, and a discipline that you have, where you say, look, I want to proceed. I'm excited. We're going to be great, but, I won't do this until I'm clear on how we're going to evaluate on the other end. Hi, Randy. Great to see you. Thanks for coming.
Hey, Michael.
And then I really appreciate Christine's answers here, which I'm just going to call to your attention in chat. And Christine, I might ask you, if you are in the kind of position to come off mute and maybe make a comment about this. You get notes on leaders from years back thanking me for the lessons they're taking forward today. That's awesome. And I'm a little jealous. I don't think I'm getting those notes, so I feel like a complete failure now.
No.
I know. No. It's wonderful. And again, that's the juice, man. That's what's worth the squeeze of the business we're in. Today, we look at movement to new roles and obtain ongoing 360 feedback data. So tell us a little bit more about kind of how that's working. How do you use that?
Yeah, well, at Walmart, we're very big into assessments. And so we have a customized 360, and it covers the competencies and the leadership capabilities and all of that. And every 18 months, we do a 360 for our top leaders. So it's a pretty big deal, because we've got 3 no, not 2.3 million employees,
Right.
and many, many leaders, but we have all of our VPs required to have a 360 every 18 months so that they can get ongoing feedback. And we measure, the progress over time.
Yeah, that's, I think, very unusual.
It is.
And it's, a truism. The higher up you go, the less performance appraisals you have, the less assessments, often, unfortunately, the less coaching or support as well in so many organizations. So it's nice to hear that you're doing that you're scaling it, obviously, to your massive scale. Yeah, I mean, you got to go to the Army to find anybody who has more reports. I work with a general. He's got over 1 million people that sort of report to him. So I'm just sort of staggered by the scale over there, Christine. But thank you very much for that. And you see, it can be done, but there's a discipline that's needed to really continue to do that. So thank you for that. And again, I'm going to say hi to Randy, and we're going to say hi. Marcia is just connecting. Hi, Marcia. Thanks so much for being here. I encourage you to take a look at chat, kind of know a little bit about, and please just come off mute if you have any question or comments, but thanks for coming. So let's keep going. So to kind of summarize, there's sort of the older model of development, good conversations, maybe some good awareness. I'm a big believer in awareness. It's obviously hugely helpful. But often people are left in the tension and stress of resolving this. They don't know if they're changing. They don't know the benefit. And I think we all kind of, one client of mine says, well, I asked him what he's solving for. He says, I just want to sleep well at night, not worry about work, not worry about family, and sleep well. I think that's a pretty good answer. So what we now want from these are new accomplishments, behavior change, and for someone to be more calm, more in flow, happy at work. Yes, Marcia, we're being recorded, by the way, and everybody will have access to the recording. And thanks for coming, even though you had to come a little late. So I appreciate that. So here comes the answers finally. So how do we get in a flow, right? So what we want to inspire the leaders, the teams, and their coaches. There's that synergistic, exponential, supercharging effect once we get social learning going. We want to use measurements that everybody can relate to. So somebody already talked about, well, is the boss evaluating the same way as the leader and the same way as the org, et cetera? Again, Christine just pointed out, we have the same, it sounded like you said, custom, but the same 360 that everybody gets and everybody gets year after year. So that's a solution to that a little bit. But the overall thing is that I feel like there's just so much learning that people fail to grab. They're so busy, they don't have that orientation. They've never had this kind of learning ROI kind of understanding. And so just the experience of doing that with me or with whoever you're working with is going to get you the benefit. So how we make it work? We combine sort of 3 main things, right? So we focus on the business goal. Okay, so this is where we say what is already important. I have one client, a healthcare company. They're doing a huge change effort because they're the hospital. They're actually the IT supplier to hospitals. The hospital is outsourcing their entire IT to this organization. So all the people that used to be employees of the hospital will now be employees of this company. And if you're familiar with that space, you probably even guess who it is, right? So that's alone supercharged my coaching. So we had 52 leaders that were going to be transitioned from working for the hospital to working for the IT company. And they were all given coaching and support. Actually, in that case, I did trio coaching where I would coach 3 people at one time, which you want to know how that works. It actually can work. But whatever it is at your organization, for your client or for your team, I guarantee they've got to change a project, some number that needs to double or be cut in half. They have retention or employee morale. They have an engagement score. They have something. They ought to have something already that's important to them already. So we ask, what do you already care about? Either you're excited about it, you just want it to go well, or you're worried about it, it's already not going well. Something that's critical, because it's one thing to try to motivate people. I think it's a lot more effective to just find out what already motivates them and then link that. So we start with the business goals. Those are the action learning goals. Then we use an assessment. Usually, you talked about a Q360. That's the assessment. You said Walmart's big into assessments. Me too. And so we might do a Q360, a qualitative 360, where I interview people. I'll usually observe the team or the individual leader, and then we involve their buy-in. The studies that I've seen, some of the sort of well-known in our field, they ask, what's of all the factors, what's got the biggest impact on the outcome? The leader that we're coaching is number one, but the coach is not number two. Number two is their manager. And how interested and involved are they saying, hey, are you getting what you need to out of that process? And let me see the difference, and let me support you. And hey, I noticed you tried to change a behavior. Yay for you. And so the manager participation is sort of that relationship link to the ROI anyway, right? Because probably the manager is clear on those KRAs or whatever they are. That's the organization expressing. So when somebody, I think it was Dave or forgive me, who asked earlier, there's org goals, or the leaders' goals. How do we sort that? This is how we sort it. So we add those together. And so the idea is that we get that synergy of these three areas that really releases the ROI. Oh, sorry, I'm a little fast there. Okay, so what's the process then that creates this? So it's somewhat like a menu, but I usually do pretty much everything on here for a full and robust engagement. So you can compare this to how you do it, or to how people do it in your organization. I mentioned the 360 stakeholder input. By the way, just asking for input from your stakeholders tends to improve your relationship with those stakeholders. Observation, we understand their key results area or their OKRs or their KPIs or whatever we're using at that company. And then I produce an assessment report. So that's a confidential report either for the team or for the exec leader. So we have a point of view. Based on that, we then integrate that with business goals, development outcomes, or behavior change. This all goes on this one form that I'm going to show you in just a moment. We involve the stakeholders with looking at that. We calculate the potential ROI right at this step. So we look at a number of factors, which I'll share in a second. Then we have the alignment process. So we usually have a one-on-one-on-one. So we have a meeting with the leader, their manager. Some organizations like to involve the HR business partner. Sometimes you might organize other stakeholders. Some of those are just the leader meeting with those people themselves to discuss it. Sometimes the coach is involved. Oh, I got to hit the other one here. Then we go into kind of the meat. These aren't equal in terms of time. Step 3 is the long step. And that's where we basically take those venues. See, to me, the business goal or project is the vehicle that we get into to drive to our developed place, to go to our new improved place. So we practice new thinking, right? Because your thinking drives your behavior drives your results. I tend to work with very experienced leaders, people that already have a good track record. They're good at the easy stuff. We're working on the much harder stuff. We're working on scaling up. And so we need to examine the thinking in order to suggest the new skills, or else generally under pressure, they'll revert. So they get a virtuous cycle going of action learning. We learn those new skills. Then we can evaluate because we've written the goals correctly. Sorry, I've got a problem there. And then we gather new stakeholder feedback. We calculate the actual ROI. And then sometimes there's a renewal. We continue. Sometimes we might end an engagement there. And so that's the steps that we go through. And again, everybody's going to get this deck and the recording if they want it. So what are the type of business outcomes we look for? There's actually, I find them easy to find once we really start looking at it. Of course, incremental revenue is a nice one to measure. Increased productivity. Of course, this brings up the question, how are you measuring productivity today? Many projects are about lowering cost. Of course, organizations have to manage risk. Maybe we have a big change, whether it's an ERP, a software change, or a product change or an organizational change, that's a great motivator to measure. Actual time for product launch is one of my favorites. Customer sat, employee morale, turnover. These are all areas where we can work. And so, I think I actually have it right here. Sorry, let me go back to sharing here. So this is how we do it. This is sort of the deliverable there. And hopefully this isn't too much of an eye chart for you. So these are all real. I've got a couple others that I'll show very quickly. And so you see our column headings start with the leadership skill. These are words like delegate, goal setting, giving feedback, coaching other people, leading change, having a vision. These are the type of things you'd find on a list of competencies or skills or behaviors. And then often that's the list. Your entire goal sheet is just, let's work on those. Instead, we say, okay, what are the desired business or leadership results? What's the actual impact going to be? This is a financial manager, and you can kind of scan what he needed to do. They're doing a number of very important things financially. So then we literally go on the ROI. So this fellow has 21 teams that work for him with a $47 million portfolio. 5% better, you can see the kind of impact. And then we say, okay, who's going to notice the change? I like to say, if you're successful in this change and I was going to film it, where would I point the camera to see it? It's a great kind of question to make somebody, well, you'd point it at my meeting with clients, or you'd point it at my team. And so you can see we actually get right into the numbers. Another example here, this is a software security executive at a very large internet company. He wants to delegate more so he can upgrade his work, more visionary. He's gotten the feedback. Again, all of this is the result of the assessments and his performance appraisals and all that input. How to network better outside the organization. What's the result? What's the impact? For example, they had a breach. If you look at number 2, they had a breach. It cost them $450 million when they had that breach. So I can't say, well, the next breach would cost the same, but there's an actual financial reference that says if we reduce the risk of that, that's an idea of the potential savings. Or if you look at the cost of his organization of $4 million, 10% improvement would be $400,000. So all of this goal sheet then goes into that alignment meeting, remember. So the person's manager might see this, their HR business partner. Sometimes they really have a struggle with this. They've never even really thought of the ROI of their team. And my experience is you go to your finance person, they love this. They love being asked this question. Can you please quantify financially? That's the kind of work they enjoy. So let's think that's it in terms of things I want to talk about. So now it's all about nurturing, but let's again, just open up for the group and talk about what are your kind of takeaways from today? What are you curious about still? And so we'll have a few minutes of dialogue here. So I would say, if you want, we can certainly have the conversation. I see, I don't see your slides. I think they just, yeah, I just stopped the slides, Christine. I stopped sharing. Gary had a question. When do you share with the client the cost of coaching? I'm not sure what you mean. Can you expand on your
so
question?
if we're going to do an ROI and the contract is $50,000, $500,000, whatever, you're going to say, okay, we're going to make a 50% improvement, then we should see $500,000 and $750,000 return. When do you tell the client, the target manager or their manager, this contract is worth $50,000 or $10,000 or $1 million?
Before that.
Okay. Do
So-
they know?
so- Yeah, so
know what
the
it costs to
cost,
have you there? Okay.
that's right. The cost is, no, let's say we're doing a team intervention over a 6-month period and it's $50,000. Well, as part of the contracting, I almost always do a rough ROI. So I say, okay, you're running, real life example, you're running the entire global financial services department for a global biotech or pharma company. And so you've got $1 billion going through that place every month. So we can do a rough kind of, so we first just make sure the scope is necessary, right? Or is sufficient. So so I kind of corrected myself. There's a rough calculation, but then we get very specific. And again, most people are just ecstatic to see any kind of calculation of this. But yeah, what is the definition of a cynic? They know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. So if I'm dealing with a cynic, then I might not be the guy for them. Yeah. But if you're really thinking about outcomes, and of course I work incredibly hard for the outcomes, I need to be competitive in my fees, but we need to put it in a context. And if the context doesn't justify it, then yeah, that's probably not the right move. And you can let that person read a book or take a class or do a number of 100 other things that are helpful. But if you really want to have a team intervention or a leadership coaching, the scope should justify it so you can get the very best. And again, I don't tell them, by the way, they tell me the ROI ultimately. David, great stuff. I like the structure. Many enterprise clients are looking for this. So thank you. That's awesome. I'm mindful of our time, but we do have a couple more minutes. So I'm going to take us right to the end. Any other comments or questions or takeaways that you can share?
What I love about this is when I think of ROI, sometimes I just think of certain categories, and you're sharing the diagram that shows it's really, there are several stakeholders who are looking for different things. And I'm always trying to zero in on what's the one thing or what's the one stakeholder, but it isn't that. And I think it's great for, because of course they might say, well, that's what we care about most. We're paying the bill and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's really important for them to see the multifaceted aspects of the ROI.
Yeah, that's awesome, Christine. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes outcomes or measures, people are worried. I want less outcomes or measures to be held accountable for. I actually don't experience it that way. It's actually better. Sometimes projects are tough because they don't have enough outcomes on them. It's not worth it, right? So we obviously have to produce, but that's the point. We're going to do that. And so the more, the merrier, ironically. Not trivial or something, but that's right. We bring more stakeholders in. The leader who enrolls people in their own development, they're the ones that really fly. And so the last thing I'll say about that, Christine, if they have those expectations, I'd rather know it. And if it's an unreasonable one, let's talk about it now. And we always acknowledge the complexity, revenue went down, or something happened in the stock, a million things can happen. It doesn't let us off the hook, but we're also not foolish about measuring it. So I think that tends to remove people's concern. All right, I'm going to go 1 minute over for any last comment. Dave, did you have any last, good to see your face finally? What would be a takeaway for anybody else? Working with the financial pros, fantastic way to gain perspective, focus, and engagement. Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, again, I want to keep my promises here. So I'm just going to display my screen for one last second. Again, this is sort of the starting line. Hopefully you've been inspired a little bit today. And in terms of some next steps, you can check out my course on Udemy. You can obviously connect with me through my website. You can read the book. I have other events coming up, and we'll be talking about other aspects. And then you can sign up on my website. So I'll just say thank you so much for coming today. And let's talk again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep. Thank you, Michael.
Great to see you. Thank you. Bye-bye. How do I stop recording? Yeah. There we go. Stop.